Well, hello, this is Adam, and welcome back to Rare Classic Cars. Today, a latest acquisition, my 1966 Toronado Deluxe. I just got this about a week ago from Seattle, Washington area. Actually, a YouTube viewer sent it to me, and I'm thankful that he did because the car is just really a gem. It definitely needs some minor mechanical work, minor or major depending on how you think of it. Needs a water pump, needs the transmission resealed, the steering gear is a little drippy. But the car sat for a long time, and what do you expect? Super, super solid vehicle. It's been repainted, I would say, at one point sometime long ago, but the body is ultra solid. The engine runs great. The interior is perfect, needs to be polished and things, and the rocket logo needs to be inverted. Whomever repainted it put it in the wrong position, as is pretty typical with a lot of these Tornados. I've seen that on a number of other ones. So that's not the US rocket, that's another country's rocket, shall we say. We got to fix that. But this is just a seminal car from a design perspective and really represents the peak of General Motors design. This 66 Toronado, I think, is, a lot of people would argue, is unparalleled and was such a trendsetter in so many different ways, from the lack of a bone line on the car to these very pronounced wheel arches that it has that are still copied, frankly, even today. Now, the 66 Toronado was a pretty expensive car, and this is a deluxe model. Oldsmobile sold about 40,000 of them in the first year, 34,000 of which were the deluxe Tornados, which meant you got a little bit nicer interior, and we'll show that in a minute. This car was also priced at about $4,800 back in 1966, and that's about $48,000 base price today. Now remember, base price did not include power windows, power locks, air conditioning, any of those conveniences. So you could easily run the sticker up on this car to $6,000 plus or $60,000 today for an Oldsmobile. Now, to put that in perspective, the General Motors portfolio of the time, the Riviera that came out in 1966, the base price was $4,400. So this was $400 more expensive than the Riviera. And a Cadillac Calais was about $5,000 base price in 1966. A Buick Electra was about $4,300. An Olds 98 luxury sedan, $4,200. So this was $600 more expensive than an Olds 98 luxury sedan, kind of the top of the line that you could get otherwise. It was $400 more expensive than a Riviera. It was a little bit cheaper than a Cadillac Calais. So that's kind of how it's slotted in the overall lineup. But suffice it to say, this was an expensive car in the day. And Olds selling 40,000 in the first year is probably a pretty good indication of something that was, I guess, a success. Although in 1967, the sales really were cut in half. But for 1966, this car was just a trendsetter in so many ways. The styling we'll get to in a second, but also the powertrain in this, the unitized power package, which comprised the 425 cubic inch Oldsmobile V8 at the time, their largest V8, making 385 gross horsepower, their most powerful engine. The next most powerful engine in Olds' stable was the 375 horsepower Starfire V8, and then standard in the 98s and other cars in the lineup was a 365 horsepower 425 cubic inch V8. And the 425 was special because it was a little bit more peppy and a little bit more power. But really what makes it special is the turbo-hydromatic 425 transmission on this car that enables the longitudinally mounted engine and transmission and front-wheel drive. And front-wheel drive, this was something that was relatively controversial for the time. Bear in mind that it had been some time in America since cars were front-wheel drive, like the Cords. In Europe, the Citroëns were front-wheel drive, but again, that was uncommon. Most Americans were used to rear-wheel drive. And frankly, that was one of the reasons, along with cost, why Buick, despite sharing the platform with the Toronado, didn't go with front-wheel drive because they felt that the ride and handling balance just wasn't right, and it also cost more. So Olds wanted to be seen as really this technology leader, and that was something that they had earned a good reputation for ever since the introduction of the Rocket V8 in 1949 and the hydromatic transmission. Olds was really leading the way in pioneering General Motors technology at the time, and the Toronado was kind of meant to be an example of that, and also an example of just trying to get younger buyers to the brand. By this point, Oldsmobile had a new general manager by the name of John Belts. He would be Olds' general manager until the early 70s, when sadly he would pass away at a young age in his early 40s due to cancer. But you see Oldsmobile's lineup transforming over this time period from having, let's say, not boring cars, but not youthful cars, to cars like this that are very, I'll say, exciting. And even years after this, you have the introductions of some really attractive 442s. The 442 obviously came out before this vehicle, but I think the overall trend for Oldsmobile in their lineup and their styling became more youthful as the 60s progressed. And it regressed a little bit once the 70s came in and Olds realized the performance days were a bit over and numbered with emission standards and insurance rates being jacked up. But this was a very special period in Oldsmobile history, again, where they're targeting the youth a little bit more than they were before, to the fact that in a few years they'd have a campaign called the Young Mobiles that would tout some of their lineup. Well, let's take a walk around this 66 Toronado, discuss some elements of the design, and hear a little bit more about the vehicle. All right, so let's take a look at this Toronado. This again was really just a cutting edge design for General Motors, and it's a one-year only design. 1966 and 7 are similar, but the 67 doesn't have these eyebrows above the headlights, and the grille is an egg crate shape. And out back, the taillights also have that egg crate pattern repeated. This car is finished in a color, my favorite color for these Tornados, called Autumn Bronze, which is this coppery metallic with orange and gold flakes in it, and it's just beautiful in the sunlight. You step back and take it in. It's hard to say this car is anything but attractive. And again, it has some really trending, cutting-edge styling features. This lack of a bone line up here, this beautiful radius that fillets out before creating this feature line. And then it goes into and forms these wheel arches that have wonderful liquid-like reflections that just show off the sunlight in wonderful ways. So a much copied now styling theme on modern vehicles. Look at how many cars have these pronounced wheel arches. You also see the very General Motors characteristic lead-in here. This for a Ford, this fender form would be straight out and then down, but they have this beautiful lead-in, leading edge of that surface that forms the peak of the fender. The car has kind of this brutish appearance, if you will, and it has a significantly extended overhang even versus the Riviera with which it shares the platform. I'll insert a picture here so you can see how much longer the Tornado's front end is versus the Riviera, based on this clay model that half of it's a Riviera on the passenger side and half it's a Toronado on the driver's side. And again, these vehicles, the Riviera, the Eldorado, and the Toronado, shared the same platform. They all shared the same A-pillar here, and windshield glass, and this front door glass, and the door inners, and elements of the rockers and the floor pan. The Eldorado had a different roof and a different backlight. But the Toronado and the Riviera have this same roof panel, the same backlight, the same tulip panel here, and you'll notice this feature line is the same across the Riviera and the Toronado, but it forms the entire rear quarter panel on the Toronado, whereas on the Riviera, that surface terminates, and then there's a whole nother shoulder and form in the rear quarter panel that's not here in the Toronado. This is just a sleek monocoque style body section on the Toronado that's accentuated by the wheel arches. Super unique for the time period, and still even today. Out back, one of the things I love about this car is, as opposed to tapering inward, it tapers outward. You can see it flares outward at the rear here, accentuating the width of the vehicle. And you have the width emphasized with this linear theme and the tail lamps, which again would go away in 1967. They would have an egg crate pattern there. And this fastback, or kind of fastbacky profile, terminates very abruptly on the Toronado. We'll have Dick Rusin on for an interview to discuss this vehicle and his involvement in it. Dick was really involved in the design of the rear of the vehicle, and he related to me that this was inspired by the Ferrari bread van, which I'll put a picture of that you can see. It looks obviously different, but it has that very quickly terminated rear. Another styling feature of these vehicles that was changed and across the lineup is this A-pillar and the windshield. Originally, again, the Eldorado, the Toronado, and the Riviera all share this A-pillar in the front window glass. But originally this A-pillar was much more dramatic, and the windshield rake was different, and there was even some curvature at the base of the windshield. That was taken away because it was felt by the design team that it was too strong of a visual cue that would get recognized as being common across the Eldorado, Toronado, and Riviera. And so it was made to be more muted so that it just blended in on the vehicles and you didn't notice it. And I think that was a genius move because you really don't. It's hard to determine that these vehicles were the same just looking at them. This car does have cornering lights, the optional cornering lights that look like shark gills, kind of like the Mako Shark Corvette concept. I think they look handsome. Some say they don't look like how they sit proud here of the fender form, but they do. This car does also have the chrome wheels. Has drum brakes all around. You could not get disc brakes on the Toronado until 1967, and braking was really one of its Achilles heels that people panned. The car would go so fast and was so powerful, you could easily get it up to 125, 130 miles an hour, and the brake fade was just unbelievable. It's fine if you're just driving it every day, you don't notice it, but if you wanted to do spirited driving, this just would not suffice. This car does not have the optional mirror that can be adjusted from the inside, but I like the styling of this. Very rocket shippy with this pointing leading edge, pseudo aerodynamic. And turning to the interior, you have also a 1 year only interior. This would be changed in 1967. Oldsmobile interior designer Blaine Jenkins was asked by Olds general manager John Belts after the first year of the Toronado to kind of tone down the interior and make it less brutish of a vehicle because they wanted it to appeal to more female buyers than what it was appealing to. Didn't end up helping sales. I previously mentioned the sales actually got cut in half by 1967 versus 1966. But there are a lot of buttons on the 1967 interior, and the steering wheel changes. This is the optional tilt telescoping wheel. You can see the tilt lever is pretty standard here, but to telescope it, you rotate this bezel, and you can see the wheel goes in and out. Pretty slick for the time. Again, this is a deluxe Toronado, which gave you a little bit better door panels, and you got the rear door handle on either side to let the passenger exit. That was something that was also featured on the Eldorado of the era, and the Riviera if you got the deluxe interior of the Riviera. Although on some of the models, this rear door handle on the driver's side, would get costed out a few years later, and it would just remain on the passenger side. It's a wonderful looking interior. It doesn't look overly luxurious, and given the price, maybe that was part of the issue for why the general manager wanted it changed. But it has, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but it has almost this speckling look or metallic sheen to the vinyl. It's just absolutely beautiful. And you can see the courtesy lamps there in the C-pillar. This car obviously does not have power windows or power locks. Do I wish it had some more options? It doesn't even have AC, which I don't really mind. We're in the Midwest here, plenty of days to drive it. I wish it had a few more options, but can't go down to your local Oldsmobile dealer and order one of these anymore, so oh well. And sitting behind the wheel, you have the rolling drum speedometer, which the Riviera would also use, and you have, I'll call it a relatively full complement of gauges. I actually think the speedometer works phenomenally well for the car. It's very easy to read. Oldsmobile said it provides instant readouts. I don't know what that means or why that's different from another speedometer, but it is a rolling drum, works brilliantly. Unfortunately, we won't go for a drive in the vehicle because the engine needs a new water pump, and let's fix that first before we take a drive. You could get in these cars optional Comfortron climate control, which was a climate control system that automatically controlled the heat, ventilation, and air conditioning and the temperature, as well as the fan speed and the mode door activation. This car does not have it. This just has, you can see ventilation, min, medium, max, heater, and defrost. So you could also get manual air conditioning. Comfortron was introduced into the Toronado from its inception. A similar setup, or automatic climate control, was introduced in Cadillacs in 1964. Cadillac had an exclusive on automatic climate control for 1 year before it was introduced in other divisions. You can see this car does have an AM radio with a manual antenna as well that you pull up and retract manually. And it has the supersized Oldsmobile accelerator pedal and brake pedal, and it does have an integral floor mat as well, which is a pretty unique feature. And you can see this black of the floor mat complements the black up here of the driver's gauge cluster, providing one continuous theme. That would go away in a couple years. Lots of passenger space. The IP is pulled out toward the driver so that he or she can reach the controls very easily, but it's pushed forward on the passenger side, and the crash pad there is pretty far forward so that you have this feeling of spaciousness, which is accentuated by the lack of a hump. There is no hump here in the floor because it's front-wheel drive. That was another element of the Toronado that made it so unique. This door panel is also something where in the brochure you'll notice that the door handle is beneath the, I don't know what you call it, piece of trim there. And some of the early build vehicles have the handle in that alternate location, but by the later build vehicles they've moved the handle. I don't know why they moved it, why it was originally in the place that it was, but they did. And overall this car is just in great shape. This does have the mirror, it says Oldsmobile up there on the passenger side. Headliner's perfect, interior's perfect, original carpets, original seats. Everything's just in wonderful shape. And even look at the door jambs here. Again, it's a Seattle car, so there's no rust. For suspension, this does share the Eldorado's suspension setup, which is torsion bars in the front, single leaf rear springs in the back, with 4 shock absorbers in the back, a lateral shock absorber and a vertical shock absorber. Let's take a look under the hood. Again, I have not detailed this car yet. I just got it and I've been doing some minor mechanical work. So a lot more to happen. Here's the 425 cubic inch V8. Somebody's added this MSD ignition, which I may just delete and go back to points. I don't mind points at all. They work fine for me. Single chamber master cylinder. 66 was the last year for the single chamber master cylinder. This one's been replaced at some point. And here you can see the turbohydromatic 425 transmission where the torque converter is behind the engine. And then there's a Morse high-vo chain that drives the transmission, which points forward in the car here. And then there's a final drive. And then here's the half shafts that go out to the front axles. I mean, look at how the size of that half shaft. This powertrain setup was used virtually unaltered in the GMC motorhomes in the 1970s, although by that time they were equipped with the 455 or the Olds 403 later, once the 455 was sunset after the 1976 model year. So overall, yes, I do need to do some engine detailing and cleanup, but you can see super solid vehicle. I mean, the frame is perfect. You have the vacuum reserve tank for the headlamps. These are vacuum operated headlamps. Let's see if it'll operate with the engine off. There you go. GM styling chief Bill Mitchell really didn't like these headlamps when they were up. He thought the car looked funny, and he mandated for the Riviera that the designers design a headlamp solution that looked good with the headlamps up or down. So it kind of looks like a frog to me with the headlights up. We'll turn these off now. Let's watch those headlights go up one more time, and we'll put them down so you can see them operate. So a little bit of work to do. Car needs a carburetor rebuild and some basic stuff from sitting, but overall, a good running vehicle. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video on this 1966 Olds Toronado. Oh. Well, you saw it live here. The car is stalled out, and I thought, oh no, that's not good. I have spark, and then I realized I don't have any gas. And I only have a little bit left. So just to move it around, if you want a trick, I have this little squeezy bottle. These are great. If you want about 30 seconds of running the car, take your squeezy bottle and dump it down here. That way you fill up the carburetor float bowl, and then just put it a little bit there. You'll have 30 seconds to run the car and move it around. And then you can do it again. So, the car's got a new fuel pump. I just ran out of gas. Wasn't paying attention. Oh well. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video on the 66 Toronado. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and right for some suggestions for you. Thank you.